Hey everyone, welcome to the Finding Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Adam Vora, and I'm so grateful to have you here. This podcast is all about exploring the journeys of incredible individuals, people who have faced adversity, found their purpose, and are now making an impact in their communities. But it's also about my journey. Over the years, I've faced my own obstacles, moments of doubt, and struggles with identity. Through it all, I found my purpose in giving back, creating a space where people can detach from the negative emotions and stigmas they may associate with their own stories, just like I did with mine. Here, we have real conversations about growth, resilience, and transformation. Whether you're searching for direction, striving for personal development, or simply looking for a place to feel seen and understood, this is for you. So if these conversations resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us on social media. Now let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the Finding Purpose podcast. Thanks for tuning in and for being part of this incredible community. Your support, whether it's through a review, a follow, or a share, means the world. If you haven't yet, be sure to follow the show wherever you listen, leave a review, and check out the full video episodes on our official YouTube channel. Every bit of engagement helps us bring these powerful stories to more people. Today's guest is someone who's creating real impact across the globe. Natasha Silverbell is the founder and CEO of Silverbell Global, and for over a decade, she's been a leading voice in the world of recovery, mental wealth, and personal transformation. Her work spans New York, Dubai, London, and Oxford, curating powerful, socially relevant panels that explore everything from toxic achievement culture to trauma, love, and healing. She's collaborated with renowned leaders like Dr. Stephen Pereira, Sir Antonio Orta Osorio, and Dr. Adrian Loth, bringing honest, necessary conversations to the forefront. Natasha is also the co-founder of the In Service Foundation, supporting mental health access for underserved populations, and the founder of the Megan Ann Foundation, created to help sober women, especially those recovering from domestic violence, rebuild their lives with strength and intention. Tonight, Natasha is being honored at the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence Gala, a well-deserved recognition for someone who continues to show up, serve others, and create spaces for transformation, especially for those navigating substance use, trauma, and mental health challenges. So thank you.
I just was thinking how full circle our lives have come.
It's crazy, right?
Since I first met you.
I think the first time I ever spoke to you was on that intake call for In Service. That was the first time I ever spoke to you one-on-one. Yeah. And it's crazy. That was, 3 years ago?
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes. Look at you. The power of recovery and really the right kind of support system. And I think there's a lot to your journey and who you are and the messaging that you have now. And look at the effects of change that you're able to create by just one person.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I even got a little emotional during that intro because
I felt it.
It kind of like this is this
real?
Yeah, you know what I mean? And it's funny because, obviously Courtney being so close to me, she kind of brought me into this world, and I do attribute In Service and being connected with your work and your coaches and your community as the catalyst behind the depth of my recovery. Because I remember when I first was introduced to it, I rejected the notion that I needed a coach.
Yeah.
I was like, right now, 12-step programming is working.
Great.
I have a sponsor. I have a therapist.
Amazing.
But I don't want to rock the boat. And Courtney was like, no, just come in.
Yeah.
And now it's so much deeper than that because I understand the impact behind the stories and behind sharing narratives and talking about things that people don't feel comfortable talking about, which is something that you do very prevalently and powerfully in the panels that you host.
Yeah, I want to go deep. I like the words that you just used. It's something much deeper than that, and it is. And I think just even understanding, I'm sure you share with your guests, I've watched some of your episodes. Congratulations, you lead very impressive conversations. So I look forward to seeing where this free-flowing conversation takes us today, but really how you were able to be open to a suggestion of something different. And I think therein lies kind of that sweet sauce and that dance that we all do with people who've tried many different pathways, and it hasn't yielded the results that have created sustainable change. And so I'm curious, actually, not that this is my podcast, but I would love to just learn a little bit more about you. How did you coach yourself into saying yes to Courtney?
One of the things that I promised myself when I picked up that initial phone call and was like, Courtney, I need help. And she flew me down to South Carolina. And I was sitting in her parents' guest house, which is like a small room, maybe twice the size of this studio. And I was like, I need to make a commitment to do the opposite of everything that I used to do. And incorporating I was waking up late and eating unhealthy, be diligent with my wake up, eat healthier, like actually eat, frankly. But one of it was I need to take the suggestions. And I understood that I had nothing to lose. And when you have nothing to lose, then why not? And that's really what it was. And, oftentimes we talk about that higher power and we talk about that spirituality. And that wasn't me making that decision where it's like, okay, I'm going to say yes.
I like that.
It wasn't. Because me would have pushed back, would have fought it.
Yeah.
Or would have accepted and then lied about it.
Totally.
And that's how I rolled. And for me, it was really important to just surrender.
Well, let's go there for a minute, if you don't mind.
No, let's do it.
And you'll shift and come to me. But I think one of the pieces you even just said now is it wasn't me making that decision. When did you recognize? That's a pretty profound thing to say for someone with 3 years of solid recovery even, because sometimes when we go into the depths of our relationship with our higher power, we're not aware of how it or the spirit is moving within us until we have this clarity. When did that shift occur for you?
Well, for me, I didn't acknowledge it at the time. I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but I think it was when I really started to understand that in order for me to be more grounded in my spirit, I need to practice spirituality on a daily basis in some form. And then when I was able to do that, then other things appeared. And when these other things, whether they were opportunities, whether they were relationships, whatever they were, I acknowledged that they wouldn't have normally presented themselves to me had I been making the decisions that I was making before. And I also acknowledged that I wouldn't have been so accepting of them if another power was kind of guiding that path and guiding my decision making. So I don't want to really kind of chronologize, like with 12 step, like with step 3, because I always had like a understanding of a higher power. I always believed in God. I've been around multiple religions, but I just knew that there was something working and rooting for me. And oftentimes I attribute it to I'm putting myself around better people. I'm not frequenting, the people, places, and things component. But really, it's just God working in my life the way that He wants for me.
And when you said you have a spiritual practice, you decided to do that, and you just described maybe some ways in which choosing the people, places, and things you chose to engage with. Do you have a spiritual practice? And if so, and I'm happy to share about mine, so don't think this is all going to be about.
No, I love it. You're curious. I mean,
I am very
it's cool
curious.
because
what is your secret place spiritual practice? Because I think therein lies something that is really valuable to people maybe listening, is to learn. That's how I learned to have a spiritual practice, because I went to an 11-step meeting, and then I hung around people who kind of had what I wanted, and then they became pastors or monks or things of that nature. I'm curious what your beginning spiritual transformation was like privately.
It's funny because like one of the first things that I heard when I was at this meeting in Beaufort, they're like, you can practice any step that starts with a 1 at any time. And I love that. You could always just keep the checks and balances right with you. Hold yourself accountable on just right from the jump. But you could always also pray and meditate. And I wouldn't consider myself a meditator as much as those first 20 minutes in the morning. And you just lay there. And,
I thank God. I just talk to him for a little bit. And sometimes, I work on the breathing. The breathing is huge for me.
Yeah.
So like the breath work is really how I kind of invite God and invite that spirituality into me first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I take daily walks. And I take walks along the water where I live. And that in itself embodies the fact that there's something bigger than me.
Yeah.
The waves, the birds, how sometimes it's high tide, sometimes it's low tide, everything. But it's all moving in synchrony. And I just walk along and I see the beauty. And that's the thing where, in the past, it was that mentality where, why me? And always seeing the ugly. And now it's like, yeah, I acknowledge there is some ugly, but there's also a gift in everything. And when I just have that as the first thing I look for, I think that keeps me grounded in my spirituality also, because sitting in shit and you know what I mean? And always pointing out the negative. I'm around people like that professionally sometimes. And, I choose to accept them, but I also pray for them because I hope that they can, see what they think is hardship or a setback is an opportunity to grow.
That's right. Yes, I do.
Yeah. What do you do to keep
This
stay
is
grounded
so
in your
beautiful. Just listening to you, so evolved, so grounded, and aware that other people's struggle isn't. I don't want to be like them, or I don't like them, or I don't want to hang out with them. It's that's where they are in their journey, and whether you use the language of pray or pause or recognize someone in their journey because you've been in their shoes, or you've had those feelings and you're like, this isn't where I want to be, but I'm not going to shame or put down this other person, to me is a really evolved state to be in.
Well, I think it's also rooted in the fact that I've seen and felt and the pain of far worse. Mm-hmm. And I think when I hear others look at something as negative, I'm like, it's really not that bad. You woke up today. You had a big lunch. I saw you eat lunch. You're blessed, and you could choose to look at those as blessings, or you could choose to get angry at an email, right? Yeah. And that's kind of how I look at it. So it's really just from my personal experience and wanting to distance myself so much from that bottom that I know that the key to that is just to look at the light.
Amen.
Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's so beautiful.
What do you do? Because I know you're super spiritual, and I know you have that retreat in London where you bring all the women together and you have a spiritual journey and a spiritual retreat. Mm-hmm. But what do you do on a daily basis?
I love this question. Well, there's lots of different things I've done over my time as what I like to say, falling in love with God, or because God's already in love with me. But the ability for me to even recognize that He loves me so much has been really hard for me to fathom, that the love that He created us with, the love that the life He wants for us is just waiting for us if we're willing to trust in His divine sovereignty over our lives, that's a pretty tough nut to swallow. Like, what does divine sovereignty mean? Like, what is she even talking about? And it's this recognition that I am good, I am whole, I am wonderfully made. I have something inside of me that what I like to think in my study in Scripture, and I have studied other religions, but I really fall into Christianity, and I can talk about my evolution in and out of religion, but I like to use the language of Christ came to have a relationship with my heart. Not a religion, and He certainly didn't create different denominations. That's for sure. So I think as I was curious, certainly AA helped me come to a belief in a higher power that wasn't shaming, and I think that was the first important piece. As somebody who was raised in organized religion, that there was and no fault to the church really, because a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And I've made my amends for institutions that have harmed me. And so as I ran away from organized religion because I felt it was too shaming, and I didn't understand that that's what was happening at the time. And my addiction was waiting for me, like that prodigal son journey. Like, give me the money, Dad. My father wasn't wealthy, but the idea that, let me take this and just go spoil it. And that's what I did with my life. And I think, what AA gives, or the 12-step community gives people who really understand the beauty of the program, is a petri dish to create your life how you choose. Yes, there is a divine relationship that will be created. And what that did is it gave me a pathway to even contemplate Christianity. And I looked at Buddhism and Hinduism, and I studied Judaism extensively, and they're beautiful faiths, but it didn't have a calling on my life. Whereas I kept seeking an understanding of who is Jesus? Why do I need him? I don't quite understand this, but I'm just so curious. I want to know more. And so for me, reading, I became an avid reader, and I'm very dyslexic.
Really?
Very.
Oh, I did not know that.
Quite. And I cheated my way through school, high school. There isn't even a picture of me at my high school graduation because I didn't feel like I earned my graduation. I did technically graduate, but there was so much shame wrapped around my inability to read with my peers at a pace. And so I'm a very slow reader. And the technology that's here today was not back then.
Yeah.
So I couldn't listen to a book on tape. I really had to slow down. So I had tutors that were friends of ours. I had two older sisters, and they were very bright. I come from a family of academics. My dad has a PhD in architecture. Who gets a PhD in architecture?
I didn't really know you could.
You can, yeah. University of Michigan. Became a dean of architecture. He taught architecture. My mom got her master's in social work from the University of Michigan, and my sister's a nurse practitioner. The one has a double master's in like French and international communications. And here I was. I haven't even graduated college. And so I stumbled out of high school. Anyways, needless to say, so here I am. I'm struck with a passion to read stories and understand. There's a really great book by Lee Strobel called The Case for Christ. And he was an investigative journalist out of, he went to Yale and for the Chicago Tribune in the 70s. And it's a beautiful, he wanted to really uncover the truth, and that was one of the first books I read, and then Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, and just a lot of different books that helped me understand, like, what is the evidence? Why would one need that? And so for me, I guess a long-winded way of me saying what drew me to my prayer meditation practice, one could say it began with daily reflections and things of that nature and lighting a candle, which was many years of just doing that. That was as much as I could. I had 3 small children as well, so that's what I could manage. But as I was able to move into my journey with really being drawn into more divine time with the Creator, it was something that I longed for, and it began in reading. It really did, and that's just wild to think that here I am, so dyslexic that I really have a hard time reading. I can comprehend, but the pace in which I read is very slow, so I needed time.
I'm not dyslexic, and you probably read faster than me.
You're very kind.
One of the things that you said early on in that, though, was the shame and that you thought God was ashamed of you. And one of the things that I've noticed about my relationship with God is oftentimes I just projected my insecurities onto God.
That's well said.
He must feel the same way I feel about me. And I think a major focus of mine in my recovery now has been focusing on the 2 most important relationships that matter, the one that I have with myself and the one that I have with God. And as long as I water those relationships on a daily basis through those spiritual practices, then other relationships become a lot easier.
Amen.
Right?
Absolutely. That's so well said.
And that's what I focus on.
Yeah.
And I find freedom in that because I don't project on God anymore, because this whole time he has been a loving God. There's a body of work, which is my life in addiction, where he had saved me multiple times. you know, and I never gave him credit for that. You know, like,
Yeah.
I probably, there's probably several times I probably should have died. There's several times that God knows what could have happened, but I survived it. I survived it all, and he gave me the gift of recovery. Yeah. And that's the best gift, and that's just proof and evidence that he's always been looking out for me.
Yes.
You know, as you have this extensive career working in recovery and supporting people, and I personally know people who just credit you with just how much you have personally done for them. What is it like? What was it like early on in your career, and how it's evolved? I want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, thank you, and I'd be happy to discuss that. I just want to say something that when people say they give me credit, that's a very kind thing to say, but it's really not me. It really is God, and he uses us. He works inside of us. And, you know, one of the things I remember at the 79th Street workshop on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, it says on the wall, it's a good meeting house. It's because everything in AA is a suggestion, and there's one requirement. Is that when the hand reaches out for help, you reach back. That's pretty profound to think about all the suggestions in AA. But if someone says, help me, your one requirement as a member of this program is to reach back. And maybe that's just to give a hug. Maybe it's just to say, here, be a greeter, or come into this meeting, or I'll call you back. It doesn't mean you have to give your whole life to this person. Yeah. So let's, maybe qualify that, so to speak. But there is something about that I think is really important. And so I just keep that mindset. And early on in my young adult life at 19, I remember, I was in a lot of beauty pageants. And somebody said to me once, because I didn't have like a platform, but I have always had a giving spirit, I think. I think we all do as human beings, but is that the best exercise for the heart is to bend down and lift someone up. And I don't remember who said it. I've tried to Google it, and there's a lot of different answers. But early on in my career, I always like to say my career created me. I didn't start with a business plan or investors. I really tried on a lot of hats that didn't work at first. I wanted to become a spin instructor at SoulCycle, and I did not get picked, so I got rejection. And I was like a front row spinner and would ride for the instructor all the time. And yeah, so it hurt. It stung, but God was like, nope, we're going to close that door. And my kids wanted me to be a SoulCycle instructor. It was so sweet. And they're like, no, Mom, because it was tangible to them as I was raising them. And so that didn't happen. And I was modeling, and I was doing events with Russell Simmons, and I would help produce his Valentine's Day luncheon at the Plaza, one of his first to do things like that. But it's not that we base everything on feelings, but as I sat back and helped fill a room and raise this money for this foundation, it didn't have that calling on my heart to really persevere. But it was a great stepping stone, because I don't have a college degree. I was a mother of 3 kids. I was pretty much a failed model. I had a semi-okay career, but I got fired from Ford. Let's be honest, okay? I literally was, back in the day, this is 2001. No, 2000, right before 9/11, actually. They literally handed me my book, my big book, because back then there was nothing digital and Instagram wasn't around. And they're like, so it's after 3 years with them, like an up and down turbulent career. They handed me my book and we're like, okay, so we're done now. Because I kept I would get a gig or something, and then I wouldn't show up, or I would show up all lit up.
Was this when you were
when I was using? Yeah, I was very active. And so, there was a lot of ups and downs. So I didn't have much in me to say, look at my pedigree or look at my academia. And so I tried on a lot of different hats as I was trying to, as a single mom, and I had gotten divorced, and try to create a life for myself. That I think motherhood, by the way, is a full-time career, and it gets knocked a lot. And people are like, oh, you're just a mom. That is so... Try not to be offended, right? As we talk about, everybody is in their journey where they are. But I think when people recognize what stay-at-home moms are such a beautiful, lifelong endeavor.
You have 3.
And I have 3, and I had to work to financially sustain myself. And so I did the best I could. my kids do recognize that I worked hard, but they did miss me. Nobody came out a real winner there. There's always a sacrifice and a give and take. So when I was putting my best foot forward to fumble around in where am I going, what am I doing to earn an income, it started with one coaching client at a time. I think the first year, 2012, I had 2, maybe 3 clients. And that's not a sustainable way to go at the time, but it was all I could do. And I remember as the second year rolled around, a lot of people would say, well, do you want to go to this West Coast symposium? Do you want to go to this East Coast? And all these things that go on in this industry of the behavioral health world. And I couldn't. I had my 3 kids at home, which was a beautiful blessing. It was like God saying, shh, be here, be present. And what program had taught me was that be where your feet are, be in the present moment. And right then and there, I needed to be at service at home with my children. And so I never was able to go to the conferences. In fact, I've never been to one conference in our industry. Yeah. And you think about that. Sure, my business grew slower maybe that way. But each client that was in front of me got all of my attention. And so as they would get better, it became a word of mouth. And I had my blinders on because I was only doing what intuitively I wish somebody would have helped me. Like you said, well, AA is great, but I could have used me back in the day. I could help. I would have been like, yeah, I need a coach. I need 10 of them. Yeah. I think they're really valuable assets in recovery when done ethically and well. So I suppose to answer, it took me a while, but I guess I didn't know what anyone else was doing, and I'm really grateful for that.
Well, it's funny because when I had that attitude towards the coaching, it was just old me saying, let's keep fighting. Yeah. That's really what it was. And I acknowledged it and I said, okay. And then I ended up working with a coach and he was great and he provided me so much support and we still talk to this day,
Amazing.
And he's great.
Yeah.
And then obviously with the introduction of Aaron and everybody, they've just been this family that I have that I could always turn to. And when I hang out with them, like we did last week for the Karen Foundation, it's just a good feeling. Yeah. I want to talk to you. Actually, I want to ask you a question about business because
Sure.
At the end of the day, you are a skilled and successful businesswoman. And what principles from recovery and what tools that you've accumulated throughout the years do you credit for how you've been able to be so successful in building your business?
I like this question. I think what we're doing now and what I mentioned before, being really in the present moment and not judging who's in front of you. There's a really great book out there called Never Eat Alone. And it talks about always being in service and showing up and not, quote unquote, not wasting. Like there's times where I like to be alone, especially now. But in the beginning, if somebody said, can I have a meeting with you? Like I was in the New York Times early on in my career. And I got a lot of inquiries after that. And a lot of people would drive in. They drove in from Boston to meet with me. I don't know these people. How crazy is it? A single mother, ex-models, like meeting with random people, soliciting. There was no ego in that. It was, sure, let me be helpful. And a lot of people came to me saying, hey, I want to do what you're doing. I'm like, great, here's what I did. Here's the certifications I went through. Here's the process I went through. Great, go do that. And I think there's something to an abundant mindset and a non-fearful attitude about being of help to those. And I was very busy. And as Deb Dana, who's the co-creator of the Polyvagal Institute with Stephen Porges, The Science of Your Nervous System, there's something called a sympathetic state. And that means you're in that fight or flight response. And so there was a lot of that survival sympathetic. I think I was probably in for a good eight years straight while I was building the business. I don't recommend it. Again, my kids suffered. I don't think I had enough rest or downtime. I don't have regrets, but hindsight's 20/20 when I give advice. Just slow down, downshift a little bit, be where your feet are. And definitely make sure that the ego and fear are not leading the decisions you make in business.
Totally. You know, and it's funny because oftentimes on previous episodes, we talk about balance. And one of the perspectives is that we're in this never-ending quest to find balance, or one of the perspectives is that you need to accept that there is no such thing as balance. And when you're watering one part of your life, another part will suffer.
That's right.
And that's really the approach that I take. And if I keep chasing something that probably isn't achievable, because I don't think there really is such thing as just absolute balance unless you're still and you're really not focused on anything. But if I am committed to, like making my business grow, then my social life is going to suffer. My relationship with my girlfriend won't get the attention that, it's warranted or the same amount of attention. But I do understand that there's other ways to compensate for that. How were you able to regulate your relationship with balance?
So I listened to an evangelical woman. She's a groundbreaking woman. I think she's fantastic. Her name's Joyce Meyer, and she's written a lot of best-selling books. Battlefield of the Mind, I think it came out in the 90s. It was a really, really good book. And it makes common sense by the title alone. And she says, to answer your question, she's always straightening things out, like you said. And I think the awareness of when the pendulum needs to swing, and or if my partner knows that I have really important meetings or a work trip around, going to London or going overseas, then I'm going to be gone for about 3 weeks to a month, or whatever that need is to build the business, and to have a supportive and mindful conversation with your partner or friends or whoever your colleagues are. And with my kids, now that they're older, I will say I am grateful that I talk to my kids every day, and they're 22, 20, and 18. And to me, that's a win, because I was not talking to my mom every day at 19 for probably about 6 years. It was really sad. And so my living amends, that's another podcast probably, how we do that. But I think the balance piece is just, I would become aware, paying attention, and the program in mindfulness, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is actually not therapy, it's a skill, where you just become really, and you have divided attention, where you recognize, like I would be doing the laundry, and I would recognize that, what time it is. I really want to go pick up my kids early from school, have their favorite treat. So I'm going to stop doing this activity so that I can go do this, or I'm going to leave early from work, or I'm going to bookend my day so that my kids I would walk them to school and pick them up. That was really important to me. Not all the time, and I had 3 of them at 3 different schools, so I couldn't be 3 different places. But I would choose in my ability to discern, who do I need to be with, where do I need to be, and that's a motivation of what's important to you. And I think when you have a clear conscience, meaning you're not putting substances that are harmful consistently, because some people can ingest substances, so this isn't just for people who are sober, right? Being mindful about what is motivating your decisions, I think, is very important, as I mentioned, in business, as well as in, I'm shifting now the conversation to parenthood, because I think that's, especially for moms, it's a big dilemma. Where do I put my time? How do I not have regret to miss this opportunity of work and or be there for my kids? And that's the balance for me as a working mom that was always so hard.
Well, I think it's also grounded in what you've already said a couple of times, where it's being present in the moments that you choose to be in and being intentional. And that's something that, for me, sometimes I could struggle with, because I do have that type of brain that just is constantly thinking and moving, and ideas are popping up, especially, I'm only a couple of years into my business. So now I'm just like, oh, this is a great idea. Oh, I should text them. Oh, I should collaborate with them. But, for me, those pauses that you mentioned, where it's like, okay, like, do I need to be doing this right now? Or is there something that A, I would enjoy more, B, that would offer more value to someone else also, and put me around someone that I love, I think is super important. And, I am more conscious of that, because the pause is a really great tool.
Yeah. One of the best.
It really is.
It really is.
because it's saved me so many times on this journey of even just watching my words and selecting my words very carefully. And I think it's rooted in that doesn't need to be said, doesn't need to be said by me, doesn't need to be said by me now. And I check myself all the time. I find myself doing that. And it's almost like a exercise that I use when I'm not regulating my emotions.
Yeah. Or the motives behind it. I used that. That was such a great tool I used for the first 3 years of my recovery on the nursery school playground. So when I was getting sober, my kids were very young. I mean, I was sober for 4 years and I relapsed for 6 months. So when I got sober, I'll have 18 years this year. Holy smokes. So I just didn't even do the math. I remember I was waking up again for the first time, my second time in recovery 18 years ago, and I would go to the nursery school and pick up my kids. And I just remember paying attention to the pickup moms, and these are lovely moms who I was friends with. And I would check myself, does what I have need to be said? And each time I was about to speak and I would run through this like little drill, right? It was all self-motivated to sound important or to tell them what house I was going to. That sounds so obnoxious, but that's the truth. Or what vacation I was going to go on. And it's like, ew, the only reason I am choosing to open my mouth right now is to look good.
Ego.
And they always say, that's easing God out. And it's like, I didn't have anything really helpful to say, so I became a really good listener. And I really like that. I love that about the rooms, that you listen, even if you don't want to hear what the other person's saying, that's usually the person you need to be listening to. And you don't realize that until after they're done speaking. And so I really began to listen. And when people would directly ask me a question, something very special happened. When you wait for people to engage you, you see who really wants to get to know you, not who you want to get to know. Who wants to get to know you? Who cares about what you have to say? Even if maybe it's coming from a place that doesn't feel very nurturing or healthy or good, it doesn't matter. They're coming with a question. So why wouldn't I have the dignity, time, and respect to answer them? And I can choose how I choose to answer it. I don't need to give all the information away if someone says, where are you going for dinner tonight? Oh, that's nice. Whatever their motives are for why they want to know where I'm going to dinner, I don't care. It's just nice to be asked. It's like the philosophy when serving seconds at dinner. When someone comes around and is asking if you want seconds, it's nice to be asked. Yeah. Can I nourish you? Can I inquire about your well-being? And so that is something that I really recognized in my early days of that, doesn't need to be said now, pausing and recognizing. And then what happened is I recognized people who actually wanted to be my friend, and I would really wait. And I still practice that to this day. I won't be the first to speak unless asked a question to, or if I'm on a podcast, that's a little different. I got excited to spend time with you, but we mutually knew we wanted to be here together today. Mm-hmm. And so I think there are so great tools that the program and just pausing and slowing down, recognizing who's engaging with you. Do you want to engage back? And how do you discern that if you don't want to be rude? There's like a lot of different layers we could certainly go into there.
It's funny because that's absolutely true. When people are reaching out to you unprovoked, or it's
feels good.
Flattering.
It feels good.
Yeah. And it almost makes me feel now there's certain people that I haven't prioritized. And they were more than likely genuine in their reach outs, whether it was, shooting me texts and saying, let's get together. And yeah, that kind of made me think there. You meet a lot of people, and throughout your journey, and me also, us both being former addicts, that's a different world, right? What skills, because to be honest, there's a lot of skills that I developed in addiction that I now have harnessed for good.
Amen.
Whether it's the way that I was relentless with drug dealers, I look at it as, hey, I'm going to be a little relentless with some leads, whether I am not accepting no for an answer. Now I've used that in a way to get yeses in business.
Yeah.
I sat down with this woman and I was talking about a project I was working on, and then we got into a little deeper conversation. I told her a little bit about what I was about, and I told her about my journey. I told her that I'm in recovery, and she paused and she goes, I love working with people in recovery. They see a goal and they chase it like they're fixed.
Yeah.
And it was cool to be seen on the other side of that coin. I guess what I'm trying to get at is how, like, the stigma now, it's more widely accepted, I feel, in a sense. Like, people are talking about it more. And folks like you are the reason why, because you're informing people. What does that mean to you? And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say that you're a vessel of God and that God empowered you to be in the position that you are.
Yes.
But what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I hear a couple different questions in there.
There's a lot.
No, that's beautiful, and I'll try to give the answers. So I think that using all our desires, our longings, our wishes, our drive for good is what we're made to do with it. I think I'm in flow state now with it, but it took time. It was bumpy as I tried different careers and tried to find that work-life balance and tried to discern who's my friend, who's not my friend, right? So there's a learning curve certainly that goes on, and there's always kind of, like, I call it like a baptism by fire, you know? When something really good is about to happen, there's a lot of adversity that comes after it, whether it's testing of faith, whether it's testing of a relationship, business or personal. The best conversations always come through adversity. And so when you can get comfortable with other people's discomfort, and that's why being in this field is so rewarding and peaceful, because I feel like the further you fall, the higher you, that's like at the trampoline, the further down you jump, it springs you and launches you higher. And recognizing that yes, I do believe God has me where I am today, and I certainly don't want to misstep. And I'm not everybody's going to like me, and I'm not going to make everyone happy, and that's okay, because I have come into an awareness of my calling and what I'm here for, and it wasn't always so clear, you know. But I had to get comfortable with discomfort. I had to get comfortable with people not liking me. I had to get comfortable with making decisions that were maybe the motives weren't always seen by other people. You know, they didn't understand what I was doing. And I think there's a place that you move through. And yes, I wanted to educate, to answer your final question, I hope. I wanted to give education to people who were not like us. So what my challenge when we work within the family system usually is, we're not going to just help the identified patient, the loved one. We want to help the whole family system create a new ethos of change, so that when the loved one either comes back from treatment or comes back from a programming we've developed and goes back into the family nucleus, that there is a shift in consciousness and understanding patterns and behaviors. But the only way I was able to do that really was through psychoeducation, like panels, discussion, and I would invite families, friends, people who were curious about what I was doing, because I was very open about my recovery, and then the relationships I had in the professional world, and to bring the best minds around the world together and lead these discussions for what we would call the lay person, for someone who hasn't had a loved one in treatment, or has and doesn't quite understand what's happening. So there's no shame and judgment, because if you don't have these panels or discussions, sure, there's books, but an engaged conversation, the only way these family members are going to get this information is if their loved one goes to treatment, they go to Family Week. There's a program in Nashville, Tennessee called Onsite. Those are great, but nobody's going to run to do an Onsite trauma family week unless there's a real crisis happening. So how do you, with grace and dignity, bring the darkness into the light, like you said, and really educate people without shaming them? And that's to bring world leaders to the table and say, this happened to me. This is a concern. And here's some great professionals you can talk to about it. And it's definitely caught on fire.
Yeah, and I mean, I love watching your panels and seeing you just thrive in educating people and sharing the gift with them. I'm going to make a major pivot because one of the most pivotal parts of my recovery was when we did that seminar at the Royalton.
Yeah.
And we were doing the trauma healing with Tion Dayton. And I love her.
Yeah.
I had her on the podcast.
Amazing.
And that was, I don't even think you, I mean, obviously,
I
you probably
watched
don't
it
know.
go down.
You
Yeah.
participated
Yes,
in it.
I was a part of your
And
healing process.
You role played in it. And it allowed me to acknowledge a major event in my life and acknowledge that it was a turning point. And it also allowed me to face it head on, say the things that I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And it played a very huge role in how I approached making my amends with my dad when the time came.
Amen.
And it's funny because now I really look at my life and I go, what were the major turning points and what do I need to uncover? And that's how I've kind of taken this approach in recovery, like making peace with those turning points.
Yeah.
And I'm no longer angry now. What were some turning points that you've
Can you
been...
say that again? That was really beautiful.
Which one?
I'm no longer angry now.
I'm no longer angry anymore.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is. And what's the only thing that's challenging about it, Natasha, is how programmed the people who love me are to assume that something might anger me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something they have to work on. And I can just reassure them, like, listen, I'm not going to react the same way.
Yeah.
What I say what I mean now.
Yeah.
There's no speculation. But that's something that they're going to have to be comfortable in because I'm the one who, my actions are the ones who drove them to be in survival mode.
That's right.
So
That's right.
When
it's a living amends you're making to them by showing them and not telling them.
And some days I'm better at understanding and some days I'm not, let's be real.
Let's be real.
And, going back, like, what were some turning points that you were able to identify on your journey that you're like, okay, I'm going to have to spend time on this? And what was the practices that you used?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, what a good question. And thank you for sharing that about Tion. And that wasn't a pivot. That was a great segue into the education, which Tion is a part of, and the psychoeducation that we're trying to educate.
She's so cool.
She's amazing. She's a legend and really groundbreaking, very good at what she does.
Yeah.
And what a blessing that was. I forgot that I role played with you.
It was awesome.
Oh, my goodness. I felt like I was just witnessing it, which I was. I didn't feel like I was,
You were my dad.
I was your dad.
Yeah.
Wow. Beautiful. What was the question again?
What were some turning points that you were able to identify on your healing journey that you acknowledged that I needed to probably spend some time on this?
Yeah,
and
it's so annoying.
What was your approach?
When you have to spend time on yourself because you just want it to go away. I'm better now. I'm fine. So it was about, maybe I was 6 years sober. And I recognized that my trauma was, I'd done some psychoanalytical work with a trauma therapist, but never real EMDR. And I ended up so blessed to end up with a really, Nancy Purcell. She since, I believe, passed away, but I lost contact with her through COVID. She was, at the time, probably in her 80s, an old school LCSW PTSD psychotherapist, old school, so good, so thoughtful, so methodical in how she would walk me through my trauma and having grace for myself. I'm from Montana, so for me, it's boot up and show up. It's we don't have time for complaining or whining. There's no small talk in Montana. It's, hi, how can I help you? Let's get to work. It's a good spirit. But so for me to slow down and almost have small talk with myself and give myself pause that I've suffered a lot was really hard for me. I don't complain. I don't want to recognize the pain and suffering. I don't I'm a big girl. I can handle it, right? And so for me, that was probably the hard. And I spent like good 2 years just with her every week, sometimes twice a week. She really helped me recognize. She was the one that gave me the analogy of me in the sympathetic state, because I was doing the soul cycle spin classes, and I would sometimes do them back to back, like 2 classes. So I'd be doing 90 minutes every day. And she goes, it's quite a metaphor for your life that you're spinning. Because if I slowed down enough, I'd have to feel. If I stayed in that you asked me on the elevator on the way up, do I like New York City? And I was there for 26 years. I fell really far down 13 years, and then I built myself up 13 years. So my current therapist and I work on reframing my relationship with New York. I had my kids there. I built my business there. You know, you can take you down, and it can lift you up, but you got to know how to have that grit and stamina. That's for sure. But I think New York City for me in that season aided in and I think you can build quicker in New York than you can anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
It lends itself to, like, there's a New York minute. That saying is for a reason. I find few people respond that way around the world.
It's true.
I've had to calibrate in different countries to their cultural ways. And so for me, it was really, I'm getting this long, slow, painful answer because I don't want to go into the pain that I did work through. And then I got another EMDR therapist. I had to a couple of years later. I had 3 EMDR therapists throughout the years. And I really believe in it. When it's a good relationship, when it's done well, it's a very incredible healing modality that there was no quick fix for me in the slowing down to get to a place where I can acknowledge my pain. But I think that is the cornerstone of change, is acknowledging pain. You know, pain is the cornerstone. I mean, we all know that, but actually doing it when you've been vibrating at such a fast frequency and you're just like, oh, I have to downshift and I have to downshift again. And you have to go through the pain. You can't bypass it.
Yeah.
That was really hard.
You know, like with pain, you know, a lot of the times I also attribute it to fear.
Yeah.
You know, I think pain and fear kind of hold hands.
That's a really good saying.
It's
I like
true.
that. Yeah.
And once I can just kind of say this is fear also magnifying that pain, it helps me to minimize the power of it. And there's been times where I've been really, 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 in pain or lonely or whatnot. And even in sobriety. And, you know, I won the Life Transformation Award, right? For the In-Service Foundation. I didn't win it. I earned it. And it was a complete honor. And looking back on that first year, and I say this a lot to people who are trying to change their lives. Growth can be lonely.
Yeah.
It can be sad. It could be dark. Growth can be almost as dark as your addiction or whatever you're struggling with. But once you get past that dark cloud in growth,
Yes.
then you kind of start to see the light. And that's how it really was for me. Because you know you want to change, and there's so many factors, and there's so many, and unfortunately it is people who you feel will always see you a certain way.
Yeah.
And as much as you try to block it out, you can't.
No.
And that first year, and especially like going up there, I didn't feel transformed.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And now I can acknowledge it's like that's just a season of growth. And it was the
Amen.
first season.
That's right.
You know, one of the things that we also said on the elevator, and I asked you, how do you feel to be honored today? And I loved your answer. It's great, but what's more important to me is that everyone does the work.
Yeah.
And I really think that's just like you to a T. Like, it really
That's
is.
fair.
And I want to talk about the work. It's hard,
Yeah.
it's time consuming, and it's selfless. And when you have committed so much of your time and who you are to the work, excuse me, when you have committed so much time and energy to the work, how are you able to turn it off when you need to? Because I know sometimes for me, a lot of the tools that I've learned in recovery, if I bring them home and I start to preach, and my girlfriend's therapist has even acknowledged that I'm 12-stepping her.
Yeah.
How do you find that balance?
Yeah,
because everyone grows at their own pace.
That's right. That is it right there. You just answered your own question. Everyone grows at their own pace, and to pause and recognize, I'm not here to take anyone else's inventory. I have enough of my own to manage and go through. And it's exhausting to be in someone else's mental or physical space. It's not where the flow state is. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at others' faults or trying to challenge a behavior or pattern, there's a difference, and it's very difficult to find that honoring self, speaking up about a boundary or where someone is about a behavior the other person has in a personal or business relationship, and then speaking up, say what you mean, just don't say it mean, and then allowing that person to do their work without you, come on, do this, do that. I'm a mom, like that's, I get it. And so I think one of the beautiful things about what we do, and also I got a lot from parenting, is allowing my children to struggle, allowing them to suffer. I'm not one of the moms that would run over when my toddler, and I remember this vividly at Madison Square Park, my son, Sam, and he fell down. He was probably 13 months old, and he scraped his knee, or somebody came by and pushed him or something. And I just said, get up. I was sitting on the bench. I wasn't going to run over and pick him up. And he realized right then and there that he could pick himself up. And maybe the boy took a toy, and I was like, go get it. Whatever it is. Like, I'm not going to fix your problem for you. And that was hard. I'm a nurturing person. I want to go hold my son, but that wasn't the time to do that. And I think in relationships, and that's why I do think, what makes me good at our company, good at what we do, is I try to train everybody in this way of be an empathetic witness. Like Peter Levine always says, trauma isn't the act that happens to you, it's the lack of an empathetic witness, right? So if someone is raped, let's say, that's horrific. That's trauma, yes. But what if I came to tell you about it and you were like, yeah, well, maybe it was what you were wearing, or maybe you drank too much. That's more traumatic to me than the act itself. I'm just going to speak for myself. But that's what Peter Levine, this world-renowned trauma expert, talks about. And I think that when you sit with somebody in their trauma, and you sit with somebody as an empathetic witness, and you're just with them, while, let's say, your partner, for example, is working on her behaviors and patterns, and you can love her in her not perfectness, right? Remember Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting and that beautiful scene? How beautiful it is. There's a really great book called The Spirituality of Imperfection. And I think we get lost. And as a type A person, like, if I just do this and I do this and I do this. And yeah, there was a season where I was doing that. It was a survival instinct to provide for my children. And I'm glad I had that. But I also, thank goodness, was wise enough to pause and not take unnecessary people, conversations, situations into my purview. One, I didn't have the ability to do that. I had my kids and I had my clients. Mm-hmm. I didn't have time to take on drama or other things. So that's something that I think also makes me much more effective, is that I don't get lost in the drama. I will not tolerate it. I just don't have space for it. And that's, unless I personally have some ownership in it and I need to fix or make an amends, it's not for me to fix.
One thing I've always respected about you is how you do set boundaries diligently. And it makes it a little hard to get in touch with you, but I was like, I'm going to text her directly. I know she's in New York.
I love it. No, but there's something to that.
But I respect that. And, that's something I try to emulate in my life a little more, because sometimes I do let too many people into that inner sanctum, and then it gets noisy and messy because that inner sanctum doesn't have too much space.
No, you just have to ask yourself, what was my motive in letting them in? And sometimes it has to get messy so you know what you don't want. And then you get, I think I'm getting a little better, God willing I am, at discerning and understanding what is a healthy engagement and what isn't.
Well, it's also sometimes I just let them in because I'll feel bad. And it's also understanding, it's like, what value do they have by letting them in? Is there mutual value? You know, is there something that I can actually offer them? And is it worth both of our time? And if I feel like it isn't, then I'm doing us both a disservice.
That's right.
I want to pivot to purpose because here we go.
Yeah.
And usually I just ask a few questions. They rapid fire, but really they never really are. What does the word purpose mean to you?
Peace.
Okay, we'll keep it rapid fire.
I can go a little deeper if you want. I don't know where we are in time, but purpose means you're in a flow state of peace and you understand there isn't questioning in your purpose. There isn't questioning in your being in that moment in times, which is a very peaceful place to be in.
I love that. What advice would you give to someone on that journey of finding purpose?
Like I mentioned before, keep trying on different things. Don't be afraid to quote unquote fail. It's just more lived information, learned information that you know what works or doesn't work, you know. I think by trying on different hats and different opportunities, but be honest with yourself. What are my motives for trying this on? And then your purpose will find you if you're really earnest about finding it. And I think there is a testing period of making sure that it wasn't too easy, because then there's that famous saying, I forget how it exactly goes, but two young men were showing up for a job and the reward was $10,000, right? And it was to go do this specific job. One guy was given the $10,000. He didn't have to go do the job. Hey, you showed up. That's good enough. Here's your 10 grand. And the other guy went and did the job of hand that was asked of him and then got the $10,000. Which one do you think got more?
The second one.
Right. And I think there's a lot to the lived experience of trial and error and not saying, oh, I can't figure it out. I think the average entrepreneur starts 7 different companies before they're successful. Don't quote me on that.
Moral of the story, don't ever pay anybody up front.
Okay. It's funny.
Just kidding.
That's a good discernment of that.
Listen, I'm really grateful that you were able to come down, and I'm just so excited to celebrate you later today. This is actually going to air in June, so this event already would have happened, but we were there, folks. If you can, please talk to my audience, let them know what you're working on, how they can reach you, and anything you'd like to share.
All right, beautiful. Hi, everybody.
We can stick to this camera.
Oh, okay. Hi. So this season, actually coming up, I'm going to be sponsoring and supporting a podcast with Jean Campbell over in the United Kingdom called I'm Fine. And it's a very beautiful way to celebrate the lived and human experience of how pain manifests in your body and your relationship with pain. And I give hats off to Jean and her upcoming year. And that's something and continuing to do panels and discussions. We did one with her about sex and love with Dr. Adrienne Loft. You mentioned that. And just continuing to have really healthy, non-shaming conversations.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Natasha Silverbell of Silverbell Coaching and
Silverbell Global.
I'm so sorry, Silverbell Global and the In Service Foundation. And a heartfelt thank you for everything that you've done for me on my journey and my recovery. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Folks, I really encourage you to check out this episode. We will have it on every single platform, YouTube. I'd be super grateful for all your engagement and your feedback. That means so much to me because I'm able to know what I can do to get better, but it also allows conversations to happen that need to. So I welcome everyone into this community. Thank you so much. And you can reach me at @AdamVora_ or at Finding Purpose Pod.